You know, we've all heard stories of people who've experienced seemingly miraculous recoveries from illness, haven't we? But can the same thing happen for our world? According to pioneering biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton, it's not only possible, it's already occurring. In his latest work, Spontaneous Evolution, the world-renowned expert in the emerging science of epigenetics reveals how our changing understanding of biology will help us navigate this turbulent period in our planet's history and how each of us can participate in this global shift. Up next, our special guest, Dr. Bruce Lipton, on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast, our regular guest, Dr. Bruce Lipton, joining us next hour. His co-author will join us, Steve Byerman. Bruce Lipton, of course, Ph.D., internationally recognized authority in bridging science and spirit, and a leading voice in biology. As cell biologist by training, he taught at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, later performed pioneering studies at Stanford University. Author of The Biology of Belief, he has been a guest speaker all over the country and the world. He's a keynote presenter for national and international conferences. Here's Bruce Lipton. Bruce, welcome back.
Thanks, George. This is just a great, exciting night for us because a special astrological significance for today, and it surprised me because it's a day where Saturn and Uranus are in opposition to each other. And the significance about that is where the existing structure, Saturn, is opposed by Uranus, which causes upheaval. And so we're beginning a period of upheaval right now. And while a lot of people are, of course, scared to death about what's going on, you can hear the joy in my heart and excitement because we're moving into something that's so fantastic in our evolution. And this is a transition. This is a birthing process. So my excitement.
Tell me about epigenetics. What is that?
Well, everybody has been taught the conventional understanding that DNA and genes control biology, and we talk about all our traits, and anytime anybody's looking for, well, what's the cause of something, we go to our genes, and that was based on an understanding called genetic control, which literally means control by genes. The new science, which has supplanted that, it's a much more big, encompassing science, is called epigenetic control. Epi means above, like when you say epidermis, that means the layer above the dermis, the skin. So epi is above, so when you say epigenetic control, what you're saying is control above the genes. And for the first time in our history of understanding, we are now recognizing that what we've been telling people for years and years and years, that genes control things, like genes turn on and genes turn off, is totally false. That's not how it works. And the new understanding really imparts an active participatory role of ourselves in the regulation of our own genes. So we're going from a period where we used to talk about, well, you're a victim of your heredity. You got cancer running your family, Alzheimer's, whatever, and you're a victim. And genes, you can't change them, and you didn't select them. And so basically you become a victim of your heredity. And then as soon as you know you're a victim, of course, then you need to go seek help to compensate for those bad genes. And that was the old belief system. And the new belief system says that the way we perceive the world we live in, how we respond to the environment, changes our genetic code on a daily basis, that we adjust our genes based on our perceptions. In fact, a mind-boggling number, every gene in your body can be modified to create 30,000 different variations.
30,000?
From each gene.
It's huge.
Yeah, in other words, genes are potentials like film, and our mind creates an image on that film. And that's as simple and as truthful as it really gets. It gets down to the fact that our perceptions and our beliefs and attitudes shape our genetics, and these change when we change the way we live from day to day. Just recently, Dean Ornish, famed for his cardiovascular stuff, did a study with prostate cancer people, and what he did is like he did with his other patients, no drugs. He just said, let's change lifestyle, eat better, handle stress better, meditate, things like that. And he followed them for a short period of time, and by changing lifestyle, they changed the activity of 500 genes.
That is amazing.
So the big thing is, here's a whole history of you're a victim, and it turns out it's like, oh my God, we were in control and we didn't know it. And because it's our perceptions that control it, it's as Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. And so basically it says we become masters when we understand this mechanism, because then we are free to change the way we respond to life. And when we change that, we change the genetic readout.
When you wrote The Biology of Belief and subsequently here Spontaneous Evolution with Steve Bayerman,
yes,
tell me of the significance of what happened to you or what you saw to begin to push you in that direction.
From the biology of belief
to where we are today. Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because the biology of belief gets down to a very simple fact that talks about that our biology and our behavior is controlled by the way we perceive the world and how our conscious and our subconscious mind operate in that unfolding. But basically it says how your beliefs affect your local life. So it affects your relationships and affects how you do on the job. It affects your health. Okay, that's fine. What I started to realize at some point was, well, wait a minute. If enough people are sharing the same beliefs, then there's a coherence. And I realized, oh, my goodness, a cultural belief, when infused into a population where everybody is creating their own reality, but when you get a large number of people to share the same creation, then it manifests. And all of a sudden I said, oh, my God, we are creating the world, but we didn't realize we're involved with that. And this is part of quantum physics. This is part of the mechanics of quantum physics and the new epigenetics and all that. And it basically says we have been participating in it, but we haven't realized that we have been programmed. And we've been programmed with being disempowered. And it's, for me, it's the most amazing thing, because when I started to realize, and I give lectures, and I talk to people, I say, look, here's a picture of a woman walking across 200 feet of coals and flames around her. And then here's a picture, a story of people, women picking up cars because a child is caught underneath it, and they're picking up 1,500 pounds or more.
Yeah.
And I talk about down south in the U.S., we have Baptist fundamentalists work themselves up into a religious ecstasy, and to testify that God protects them, they play with copperheads and rattlesnakes, poisonous vipers. They get bitten, nothing happens. But the ones I really want to emphasize were some of them drink strychnine in toxic doses as testament that God will protect them, and they drink this strychnine, and nothing happens to them. And all of a sudden you go, wait a minute.
That's a little too far for me.
Well, I'm not ready to do it myself.
No.
Boy, God bless them.
Yeah, I'm positive, and I believe in our ability to heal, but I'm not going to drink strychnine.
No, and it's, and so why is this exciting? Because when the belief question is out, or when a belief is so firm and positive, then we manifest things out of our beliefs. And we have to recognize that we have been cultivated with beliefs in our culture that shape our civilization. The beliefs that we buy give character to the civilization. So imagine this. I mean, we bought, and we'll talk about it later a bit more, but we bought a belief in Darwinian theory. And you say, so what does that mean to our culture? And it means, two things. One, it says, how did we get here? According to theory, random mutations, genetic accidents. And so you say, well, then what's our purpose for being on the planet? And you say, well, there really isn't any purpose at all, because it was just an accident. That's the only reason we're here. And so you go, okay, we have no purpose in being here. And then you say, well, how do we do the best to live on the planet? And then you go to the other part of the theory that says that we're in an eternal struggle for survival with a competition for being the fittest. And all of a sudden you realize, my God, we're living in a belief that this is a dog-eat-dog world, and we all have to compete against each other to get our piece of life out of this. And this is our belief because this is what science said. And now
it's remarkable work. We're going to be back with you in just a moment. Dr. Bruce Lipton, our special guest tonight, author of the book Spontaneous Evolution that he co-wrote with Steve Bayerman. We'll be back with Dr. Bruce Lipton in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Bruce Lipton, our guest tonight. Bruce, let's talk about spontaneous evolution now. And by the way, you sent us an incredible crop formation, which I've got to ask you, Did you guys make that?
You would think we did, because I was.
It
so
is
shocked.
identical to your book cover.
It came out at the same time the book was coming off the press. It was like in the field. Something was going on. It's like it was just an amazing sight to see a crop circle and the book cover share the same image.
It's weird. And we've got that over at coasttocoastam.com. It is truly bizarre. And I think what makes it even stranger, you've got on your cover these twinkly kind of lights, they look like, right? All around the body, Da Vinci's
Absolutely,
body.
fractals.
Yeah. And they're in the crop formations. I mean, it's very strange.
It was close, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I get so excited by this because Steve Behrman and I have this book that is based on science, and it basically says that we're coming to the end of civilization as we know it. It's not just because all these crises that are looming, and you say, well, it looks like that. It's like, no, we are coming to an end because of a necessity, and we're actually on the bridge to a new form of civilization right at this current moment. So the unfortunate part is the media wants to keep us so entrapped in all the fear stuff that we're really not getting a vision of where's this all going, because that's the part that's real exciting, and it's an evolutionary jump for humanity. And as you mentioned, sometimes we know people who are deadly sick, and everyone calls them, like they're finished, terminal, and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they just spring to life, and they have what's called a spontaneous remission. And while everyone right now might be looking at the planet and saying, oh, my goodness, the environment, the air, the water, the fuel problems, and all this, it's coming to an end, and we look at the Earth as well, life is becoming terminal here, it basically can undergo the exact same spontaneous remission because the biosphere is a living organism and operates the same as the human body. And the main thing that promotes the spontaneous remission in the patient, and what we need for the spontaneous remission of our planet, is a fundamental change in belief. And that's really what is the big step that we're working on right now. And so what Steve and I have written in this book is about a simple fact. It's so simple. It goes like this, that the civilizations have come and gone in Western civilization. We can go back and say we're like the animism, which was like the Native Americans, which everything was material and spiritual, and they mixed the two worlds. And then we went to polytheism, where spirit got separated from physical things and turned into separate gods. And then we went into monotheism, where we had a single God. And then at some point that fell into the current thing called scientific materialism. Civilizations' characters change. And the reason is this, because what happens when a civilization grows, it's sort of like a child. It starts, a new civilization is like a child, which is in development and trying all kinds of things out. And then once it says, well, this is the way life is, it becomes very rigid, like a parent, and says, that's just the way it is. And the problem is, in a universe that is never staying the same, a universe that is dynamically, continuously changing, nothing can be rigid because it doesn't bend with the evolution. So rigid civilizations, when they hit a wall, create challenges. And then new beliefs and new thoughts come in, and the old civilization goes, and a new one makes its way in. And what we're finding right now is the fundamental beliefs of this civilization about how we act and live on this planet, which were based in science from 100 years ago mainly, those beliefs are found to be wrong. And it changes how we're going to learn to have to survive on this planet. We have to change the way we're living. So then you say, well, how does that happen? And the answer is the old structure falls apart, and a new structure will come in to take its place.
Is that a good thing?
Well, it has to be, because let's look at it this way. If we continue doing what we're doing in the way we're doing it, then here's the simple fact that science has established. We're already into the sixth mass extinction of life on this planet. 5 times in our history, in the evolution of the planet, life was essentially wiped out and then started all over again. And what we're finding right now is we are deep into the 6th mass extinction. And the difference is that the first 5 were things like asteroids, comets hitting the Earth and turning the environment upside down. But the current one is unique because science is attributed to human behavior. So we are creating our own extinction by the way we're living on this planet. And the issues is that, Einstein said it basically says you can't solve the problems with the same thinking that created the problems. And the institutions that we have, which include healthcare and government and economics and all that, are the things that have been hurtling us toward extinction. And it says so very simply, well, you don't want to change those. You know where you're going. And why this all coming down is because it's not sustainable. And to make it sustainable, we have to change the way we deal with each other. And the simple evolution, the conclusion, what is this all about? It's not the evolution of the individual human that we're talking about. That happened a million years ago. The evolution we're talking about is the evolution of what is called a superorganism. And that is, each human is the equivalent of a cell in the body of a superorganism called humanity. And as much as
which really hasn't developed yet.
No, we're right on the edge of making it happen or not. It's very interesting. We are indeed in a crisis, and there's no guarantee it's going to go one way or the other way right now unless we collectively get our beliefs changed. And that's what, that's why your audience is so cool and why it gets bigger, because more people are thinking, more people are looking for other answers, because the current institutions are leading us to hell because of their interest in corporate profit and not sustainability of the planet. And so they have to fall.
You have hinted that right now people seem to be living in fear, chaos. No matter where you go, there's something happening, whether it's the economy or now they're talking about more troops in Afghanistan. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense anymore, Bruce. How does that affect people and their outcome as you look at spontaneous evolution?
Oh, it is the most. We have a healthcare crisis, and it's very interesting.
We have an everything crisis.
Yeah, well, I want to do the healthcare crisis because you want to talk about how a belief is where that all came from, and that's where it's come from. It's come into this issue, is that we now recognize that, for example, 90% of doctor visits are all due to issues of lifestyle. That we're starting to recognize that things like cardiovascular disease, 90% lifestyle, diabetes type 2, lifestyle. All these are starting to turn out to lifestyle. So you would think, in an intelligent world, if we know that it's due to lifestyle, then we would put our money where our mouth is and start saying, look, we have to teach people the nature of science about how they're driving their own bodies into the ground with stress. And so you'd think we would do that. But no, we put our money into buying more drugs. And the issue is drugs are the problem in the first place. So, and it's an institution that already knows that that's not the solution, but it's an institution driven by so much profit that it's like, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
So you're going to take the swine flu vaccine?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry.
No way.
Absolutely not. And it's just people are getting such misinformation. And the problem is, if you understand the biology of belief, how your thoughts change your genetics and your behavior. I mean, this is what we're beginning to find out. Like cancer, they're always looking for the cancer gene, and it turns out most cancers are just due to the epigenetics, which is connected to a person's beliefs.
And isn't it true everyone has a cancer cell or cells in their body right now? It just determines what your immune system is.
Absolutely, and there you got it, George. It was your immune system, and then we go back to our story about stress, and here's where it comes in. When you get stressed, three things happen to your body physiologically. Number one, look at your body as two areas, the gut, the viscera with all the organs in it, and then the other part are the arms and legs, okay?
All right.
The viscera is involved with growth, and the arms and legs are support and protection. So now basically it says this: when you want to energize the system, you have to give it the blood. And so the blood is distributed through the body where it's needed. So when I'm in a state of relaxedness, I'm happy and everything, most of the blood is in my gut. And the function there is to maintain the body and purify the system and clean it up and do all the maintenance. That's what it does. But when I get stressed and I get afraid of, like, fight or flight, the stress hormones cause the blood vessels in the gut to constrict. And that pushes the blood to the arms and legs so you can get ready to fight or flight, whatever you got to do. And what happened, stop for a second and realize, well, you shut off the blood to the viscera, which is growth. and you put it out there because you need all the blood for the protection.
Right.
So if you're under stress, you shut off your growth maintenance mechanisms. But here's the one that I was trying to get to is more important. Because there's two protection systems, the adrenal system, fight or flight, run from that tiger, and the other is called the immune system. That's the internal one that takes care of anything that gets on the inside. Well, so let me give you a scenario. You can get the answer here. It's like, imagine you're controlling the energy flow in the body, where the blood's going to go, and you're up in the brain, and you got your office, and a phone rings up there, and it says, oh, my God, we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And just as you get that phone call, another phone rings and says, oh, by the way, we have a bacterial infection in the gut, and we have a bad case of diarrhea. And then you're the energy person, and I'd have to say, well, how would you provide the energy? How would you split the energy? What would you do in this situation? The answer is, obviously, I put in the energy to running away from the tiger. I mean, basically, if the tiger catches you, the bacteria are the tiger's problem at that point. And so basically, it says this. When we get into fight or flight, we take the blood out of the gut and put it into running, and we stop growing. And when we have fight or flight, and we also have an immune system, the immune system with internal issues is shut down by the stress hormones. The stress hormones actually shut down the immune system.
And if you're under stress constantly,
yes,
you're in trouble.
Absolutely, absolutely. George, that's the whole secret of 90% of our health crisis is to recognize we have been living in a 24/7, virtually 365 stress, continuous stress going into the system, which continuously inhibits our ability to grow and maintain our bodies so that we're always on the edge of bad health. And secondarily, it shuts down the immune system, which opens us up for anything, especially those cancer cells you talked about, which if you're in a healthy state, the immune system would take care of them all the time. But when you're in stress state, the inhibition of the immune system is what allows that cancer then to take off because it's not being watched at.
What causes the stress? Bruce, we're human beings. We're bombarded every day with every kind of problem. How do you fight it?
Well, this is the part is not to engage in it. You see, I think one of the biggest issues is like, okay, let's launch a counterattack to something, and then you realize, wait a minute, what are you doing with your energy? Even if you don't agree with them, you're still participating in dueling with them, because the real way of doing it is step outside of it. It's really step outside of it, not to get engaged with it. And it sounds easy, and it actually is when you start to do it, is to disconnect, because when they pull you in, they cause your hormones and your growth factors and your stress hormones they control it. And this is what this world's all about. Turn on the news, be afraid. And let me tell you the last one, George, because we talked about two things. We said stress shuts down growth,
right,
which is and then shuts down the immune system. And the third one is like, I call that adding insult to injury. The third one is when you're in a fight or flight situation, a quick question, do you think you use conscious reasoning and logic, or do you use reflex behavior?
Reflex behavior primarily.
So then what happens is the stress hormone, remember I told you the stress hormones cause the blood vessels in the gut to constrict and push the blood? Well, the same stress hormones cause the blood vessels in the forebrain, the thinking, conscious part, to constrict. So you can push the blood to the hindbrain and give a lot of energy to the reactive, reactionary, fight or flight response.
That's the animal instinct in us, right?
Absolutely, and no thinking.
And no thinking.
And we
just
become
do it.
less intelligent.
It's almost like driving a car. Now we drive cars. We don't have to think. We know what we're doing, right? It depends on your driver education, doesn't it, George? Some of us, yeah.
Yeah, so look at all the consequences, add them all up, and you say, no wonder why we're going bankrupt. They're trying to fix stress with medicine. That doesn't fix it. It's actually changing your response to the stress.
Okay, here's a guy. He gets laid off from work. He's got a family. He's got a mortgage, and he hasn't gone into default yet. But now he's out of a job, so he may. That guy's going to have stress, Bruce. What do you do about that?
Well, this is the hardest thing in the world, because this is what's unfolding right now, and we have to realize we must understand there's one way out. That's very critical, because it is the key to the bigger problem, and the answer is community. We have to begin to return to the nature of a community. When I was young, 60 some years ago, I remember communities where people knew each other and watch out for each other and take care of each other.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
They didn't even lock doors then.
I know it. We used to keep the keys in the car.
Now they lock it, put a chair against the door,
and they're locked in their own little prison
and a
cell
chain.
at night.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Why does that happen? The answer is because we bought into a belief that this world is based on continuous strife and a struggle to survive, and watch out because somebody's going to come and get you in a dog-eat-dog world. We were programmed with that belief.
Boy, but that could happen. Crime's out of sight.
Oh, yeah, but then here's the problem. Beliefs create reality. So is the violence and all the stuff that we're facing now real, or is it because we have collectively creating this? And this is so important about this evolution. To spontaneously evolve, it's going to take a number, perhaps like the TM people found, maybe I think it's the square root of 1% of the population gets a coherent thought and life of living in harmony, and that will be like a tuning fork. And the other people, the other cells in our body of humanity will start to resonate with that. And when that number is reached, we will change this movement from where we are into community, because when we live in community, that's where harmony and health is going to be found.
See, what I would love to see is somebody elected in office whose campaign is not change or this or that. It's, we're going to make your life easier. We're going to make it comfortable. You've got to work and you've got to do what you have to do, but our role in government is to de-stress you. And that's what we're going to do. You know what? Show me one candidate, Bruce, who would say that. And that's a person who's going to get elected.
Well, I mean, the problem is if we were electing our own leaders, that might be something, but I have doubts about that myself. And I see that this is a movement. But the big issue is it really comes down to the money. And it comes down to the simple fact is this: we're living in an unsustainable system. And it basically starts, let's say there was no money in circulation. And the first day the bank opens up, first bank. And you go in the bank and you say, I'd like $100. And they say, okay, we're going to loan you $100, and you're going to have to pay us back $110. And then all of a sudden, so let's just say you're the only customer. And then I say, okay, you've got $100. Where are you getting the other 10 from? Yeah. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I can't pay back the other 10. It doesn't even exist.
I don't have it. That's right.
And this is the principle of the banking system of the world. We all borrow the money from something that doesn't exist and have to pay more back than that didn't exist either. So it's not real.
See, I think these leaders have read books like Spontaneous Evolution, all right? And they have done the opposite to try to get to us. Is that possible?
Yeah.
I mean, they see how we can win, how we can fight back. So they create all these other things to keep us going crazy.
I would have to agree with you, unfortunately, George, on that. It's just, you know what's interesting? Way back, the Jesuits would tell people, they were very proud, they would say, give me the child and I will show you the man. Or what they also said was something like, you give me a child until it's 6 or 7, and it will belong to the church for the rest of its life. And you say, well, what's significant about that? And the answer was, they knew it already, that if you can get the first 6 years of programming into a child, you control that child.
Absolutely. Well, I had a story tonight. They're saying now spanking's not good. It affects a child, and it happens.
Oh, absolutely, because this is where the child builds its relationship with the world. And the first thing is no trust of anything. And so nobody trusts anybody or anything in this world. It's a scary place because we fractured the family.
We're bringing in your co-author at the top of the hour, Steve Berman.
Yeah, Steve is wonderful.
Now,
I'm so happy.
Who is Swami Bayanananda Wanda?
Steve is a political science enthusiast and commentator. He's actually called himself an uncommon political commentator. And basically, Steve's work has been in the New Age circuits of comedy. And he plays the Swami and makes satirical fun of the government.
All right, we're going to have some fun with that when we come back. Steve Barron joins us, the co-author with Dr. Bruce Lipton into Spontaneous Evolution, also known as Swami Bayanananda. Absolutely, with our special guest tonight, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Spontaneous Evolution. And we'll be back with Bruce in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, you know Bruce Lipton. Now comes his co-author in his book, Spontaneous Evolution, Steve Behrman, author, humorist, political, and cultural commentator. Now, he's been writing and performing enlightening comedies such as Swami Vivekananda, Nanawana, for more than 20 years. A pioneer in alternative education, a holistic publication, Steve is very active in transpartisan politics and the practical application of spontaneous evolution. He's joining us with Bruce. Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great now that I'm finally here. And by the way, the Swami is beyond Ananda. It just kind of rolls off the tongue.
For me, it'll be just Swami.
Yeah, okay, we'll be doing tongue rolls later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bruce, we'll bring you in now, too, with us. How are you?
Right, I'm here. I'm excited.
And now tell me a little bit about your relationship with Steve. How did this all transpire?
Well, I was out on the road giving my lectures on the new biology and talking about fractal evolution, and Steve, through a connection of ours, showed up at one of the lectures, and I found out that he was working an idea about called the body politic, and I was talking about the political body, and at that point, the two of us got together and said, "Oh, wow, you know, if we can tie this biology into Steve's stuff about the new social patterns and organizations necessary for sustainability, we put these two together. And the exciting part about the book, it doesn't just say that a crisis is looming and it's coming, we know that, but it also offers resolutions, a sustainable, positive future based on the nature of fractal biology and evolution.
Bruce is on a lot with us, Steve, but we should have you on every once in a while, too. We can use a little humor on this planet.
Well, you know, the thing is that in presenting ideas like this, which actually jar and change people's beliefs, to have a little bit of humor in there really enables people to develop the kind of flexibility that we need, because after all, we've been subject to these invisible beliefs that we mistake for reality, and yet they're only beliefs.
Absolutely. And tell me about yourself a little bit more than just the very brief bio we have.
Okay, well, actually, my background is in teaching. I taught in Washington, D.C. I started an alternative high school for high school students who are disaffected, and we ended up, my co-teacher and I ended up writing a book published by Simon & Schuster called No Particular Place to Go, Making of a Free High School, which was published back in the 70s. And then I taught in various places. I taught at Wayne State University, but I've always been interested. Now, when I first lived in Washington, D.C., I met somebody who was a world-famous expert on communal living, but nobody could actually stand to live with him.
When were you at Wayne State, by the way?
Oh, I taught at Wayne State in the mid-1970s. I taught in something called the Weekend College.
Amazing. I went to the University of Detroit.
Ah, yes, University of Detroit. I know it well.
Yeah, well, Wayne State is a great school. Madonna went there, I think. Didn't she?
I think she went to Mount Madonna. No, she. No, I think she did. I think she went to UDC, University of Detroit.
Well, you know what? I think we need more teachers like you, Steve. You sound like you made the curriculum entertaining for people.
It's interesting. I was teaching primarily auto workers at this in this program, and they would bring their wives to class because we always had something interesting going on. And people talk about how people aren't ready to learn and that we've been kind of dumbed down and so on. And my experience has been just the opposite. My experience is that when you talk up to people and you give people something to actually be inspired by and to stretch them, people are capable of incredible things, including participating in this great evolution that we're in right now. And that's really one of the reasons why Bruce and I wrote this book, was to inspire people to participate at this time. The evolution is something that's not going to happen without our participation. And what it means is that in every phase of evolution, two things happen. There is an expansion of community. There's an expansion of awareness. And we're hoping that through this book, we can show people what the possibilities are if we were as smart as ourselves, if we were as coherent as ourselves and harmonious.
Your personality, and of course I've known Bruce for years with this program, your personality comes across to me as just bubbly and happy and spontaneous. I got to believe your life is nothing but positive.
Well, I would like to believe that too. I think that in these times where there's plenty of stress, we're really
sure.
we're really all having to stretch ourselves. I think this is a time, we talk about this planetary evolution, but really what we're talking about is individual change, and we're all up against our own individual programs and challenges. Having humor gives perspective, and it really allows us to look at our problems from a slightly different viewpoint.
Now, this is a family show, Stephen, so give me a little bit of Swami. Give me an idea who he is.
Okay. Well, let's see if I can bring him on. Now, Swami is turban-powered. That is, when he puts his turban on, that's how he gets his wisdom.
Okay.
So I'll bring him in. Well, hello.
Well, hi there, Swami. How are you?
Well, I am very good, and it's great to be here. And you know what? We have no choice because no matter where we are, we're always here, and it is always now. So, would you like to be in the now more?
I would love to be in the now more.
Well, it's too late. It's already then.
You have imparted wisdom on us.
Well, yes. Well, little limb particles. They're called little limb particles of wisdom that we have. But there is some other wisdom that we have, and that is that we are all in this together. That is, we call this the one suggestion, because in this planet that we have right now, we have to love thy neighbor as thyself. Otherwise, there goes the neighborhood.
What if the neighbor is just a downright louse?
Well, we do have sociopathogens in the body politic. Yes, it's true, and these people do need to be isolated. But the way that we isolate them is by focusing on what 95% of us who are not sociopathogens have in common. We call them the virtues and values that are shared by people who are traditionally religious, who are spiritual but not religious, who are ethical atheists, who are secular humanists, who believe in the golden rule, that the golden rule should overrule the rule of gold.
Stephen, Swami, Dr. Bruce and I have already said we're not going to get the swine flu vaccine. How about you?
Well, no, I definitely don't need the swine flu vaccine. I will channel Porky Pig to say, that's all, folks. No, I'm not going to get that.
Thank you, Swami, for being on the program, and you can go get Steve now.
Yes. Okay. Well, the Swami, he's hovering here, and he will chime in whenever that's
appropriate
or inappropriately appropriate.
Bruce, with Steve and you writing this book, what different areas did you both look at? I mean, I've known you, Bruce, for years.
Well, my part was bringing in the nature of the human body as a community, because we see ourselves as single living entities, and the truth is we're actually communities of upwards to 50 trillion individual cells, and what becomes very important is that the cells are the living entities, and when we say that, is a global name for our community, and so it becomes understandable when you look inside the body. Here's a simple fact: that virtually every cell has every function that you and I have, George. I go through your body: respiration, digestion, excretion, reproduction, endocrine, even immune system. Virtually every cell has all that same thing. So cells are like miniature people. They work in a community. Cells have jobs. Cells get paid for their work. They don't get paid equally. Some cells have such a big job they even have entourages to help them. But the whole point about it is there's a politics, there's an economy, there's a technology, and if you can get 50 trillion cells in a community to live in health and harmony and understand how the politics and economy of that system works, then what you're recognizing is we can get a few billion people on this planet to do the same. It basically reflects an old wisdom that said the answers lie within. And that's exactly what I was noticing, that as Steve added one day, it's like, besides the cells having jobs and health care and all that, and no cell left behind, this is an opportunity to realize that in a fractal universe where the structures repeat themselves in a self-similar fashion at any level,
Steve just had a report that the latest research shows that a tremendous majority of people no longer believe news is accurate.
You know, I just saw that today. 67%.
Unbelievable.
Well, the Swami calls the mainstream media the brainwashing machine stuck on spin. and I think that this is really very significant. The profound lack of trust indicates that the very institutions that are supposed to be serving us are actually failing us. Every institution, we could talk about healthcare, we could talk about banking, we could talk about schools, on and on and on and on. And it's because, as we point out in Spontaneous Evolution, these institutions are based on these misperceptions, these false beliefs that have been disproved by science and yet are part of the dogmatic religion of scientism. And so the reason why these institutions are failing, the reason why people are mistrustful of the government is because all of these institutions have they're perpetuating themselves like any living organism. They're organizations, and they're perpetuating themselves. And my early career was in teaching, and so I spent a year teaching in the public schools. And as any idealistic teacher that goes into the school system remembers, you go in there thinking that you're going to change something, and then after a period of time, you find out that you've been ground down and the system persists. And it's not because people are bad intentioned. It's simply that the structure of those organizations are based on false premises, and they are becoming more and more obsolete. So it's understandable that people mistrust the government. They don't think the government is telling them the truth, and frankly, I don't think so either.
You know, and it's everything. It's a mistrust in government. It's a mistrust in mainstream media. They're starting to turn to the alternative media. We're kind of in that gray area, Bruce and Steve, in as much as we're on 525 radio stations. We're all over the planet, but our programming is more alternative than mainstream.
Definitely.
So I'd consider us, the alternative mainstream station here.
But we call that in the book, George, we call it creative minorities. And creative minorities are the people that pull themselves out of the crowd and start to listen to a new plan, a new vision. And they're the foundation for where the new thoughts come from for the next level. Because if you play the same old stations, you're going to get the same old story, which is the story that has led us to this brink of extinction now. So your service is so critical because there's people that want to know, and that's what part of this evolution is driven by. This is the first time people are saying, wait, there's more to this world than what I've been told or what I've been led to believe, and they're seeking, and I'm so glad that you're there because there's a source for their search.
And what we're finding, though, is with the distrust rising, the lack of confidence in government or mainstream media or maybe, their institution where they work, we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. People seem to be turning. They need something to turn to, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I'm involved in, when you did the little bio earlier, you mentioned transpartisan politics. I think that so many of these opposites, like the Democrats and Republicans, like the conservatives and the progressives, really, these are two functional impulses that are present in life. Just as we have growth and protection in biology, we need progressive and conservative, but they need to be dance partners instead of dueling dualities. And part of what's happening now and what we're suggesting in kind of the punchline of the book is that this is a time to integrate these opposites, these things that we thought were it's either this or that, and realize it's this and that.
It is this and that, and it's getting there. You both talk about in the book 4 myths or perceptions of the apocalypse. Explain that. You first, Bruce.
Well, basically what these are beliefs that we bought into and then guide our life by it, and that these were scientific principles at one time, and since then science has rewritten them, but the public is still following or being led down the old path. And so the 4 beliefs are, one, that the world, the universe we live in is a Newtonian world, which means in physics more of a material-oriented world, physical. So our perceptions in life are matter, physical, money, gold. These are the things people want, material possessions, and we rape the planet to get all this matter out because we believe that matter is primal. And quantum physics came in 100 years ago and said, you know that physical stuff is actually influenced by the invisible stuff, and that the invisible realm called the field is involved with shaping matter. And it's interesting because physicists call the field the invisible forces that influence the material world, and spiritualists talk about spirit as the invisible forces that influence the physical world. And what we're beginning to see is a union of science and spiritualism, recognizing quantum physics as the medium. So all of a sudden it says, no, it's the non-tangible things that are what are relevant in our world, like love and harmony and peace and joy, the things you feel in your body. That's number one. Number two, the belief that we've been led down a path, and even though leading-edge scientists know it's not true, the public is still led to believe that we are victims of our genes. Genes control our lives, and your fate is some way predetermined by your genes, and you believe that. So if you believe you have cancer running in your family and you end up with cancer, you say, yeah, see, that was genetic. But now the new science of epigenetics reveals that your beliefs are turned into genetic activity. It's the equivalent of what's called the placebo effect or the nocebo effect, how your beliefs influence your health. That's two. So the difference in the second one is, no, we're not victims. We're masters of our lives. The third one is the belief that this world is based on competition, that Darwinian belief that we're in a struggle for survival, which keeps us armed, guarded, and on stress 24/7. Well, it turns out evolution is actually based on cooperation and community. So we're going 180 degrees off of the evolutionary tangent by our competition and fighting, and are looking at scarcity and fighting over the pieces left over. So our whole culture has been wrong in that regard, that harmony and unity is where survival will come from. And the last one is the belief that that random mutations, random evolution occurred, and that we were just here by accident of genetic crapshoot. And it turns out, no, it turns out that organisms were designed to bring harmony to the environment. Every time an organism is introduced to the environment, it changes the balance a little bit, and then if it goes off balance, another organism is introduced to bring it back in balance. So then you say, so what was our purpose here through adaptive mutations, not random? And that is, as the Native Americans knew, our mission is to tend the garden. And here, look what we did to it. So you can see why the old beliefs have taken us down a path of self-destruction, and continuing those beliefs will, of course, lead us to that end. And yet, as you mentioned, and your audience is so critical in this, George, is that, okay, there's time for new beliefs. And the new beliefs, once they're installed, that changes the way we relate to each other and to the planet, and that spontaneous remission from the edge of this, what appears to be terminal phase, will happen virtually spontaneously.
Steve, what would you say to students nowadays based on everything that's going on in this society?
Well, I think that in taking off on something you suggested earlier, George, in regards to how people are so mistrustful, I think that there's been kind of a disheartenment in the heartland. We have homeland security, but maybe we need heartland security in the sense that because of this emphasis on materialism that's been so pervasive that we imagine that that's what life is about, we've been subject to the 3 M's, money, material, and the machine.
Absolutely.
And consequently, there's a sense of disheartenment and disconnection, a loss of community. And so I think that at this point, I'm very excited when I meet young people, and the young people I've met recently I'm just so inspired by, because they recognize that they have to move beyond these polarized party lines of Democrat and Republican, conservative and progressive.
Could you say that, well, I'll ask you this when we come back, but do you think young people of every era was that way? We'll be back in a moment. And in a second, we'll be back with Dr. Bruce Lipton and Steve Behrman as we talk about spontaneous evolution right here on Coast to Coast AM. Hey, have you picked up the After Dark magazine yet? Well, you can do so. You call 1-888-727-5505, or you can go online at coasttocoastam.com. great stories of the supernatural, the unusual, and yes, science and the bizarre as well. What is that conference coming up, Bruce?
In Tampa in October.
I mean, but exactly what is it?
It's all different authors from Hay House, which is a whole range of different authors, including people like Greg Braden, are presenting their stuff at one site so that a lot of authors show up at the same place.
Yeah, they have given us some great guests on this program.
I find them one of the most wonderful companies that I've ever worked for, and they're so consciously oriented, and the stuff that we talk about in our book about the new evolution, they're really exemplars of that.
Steve, you were saying that the young people nowadays, gives us hope for the future. But, don't you think every young generation, even ours, you and I grew up during the Vietnam days, you did too, Bruce, every young generation probably was hopeful for the future for us?
Well, I think that this generation that we're a part of, we definitely got things started. But things now are different in the sense, first of all, that the ways of communication, the Internet, the how quickly you can access information.
Oh, my gosh. When Michael Jackson died, it was all around the globe in minutes.
Yeah,
minutes.
Well, in addition to that, there's so many other things that people are learning. And I think that, one of the other characteristics of evolution is this communication, is this rapid communication. And, of course, in terms of people not really believing what they see in the mainstream media, there's so many different, the reason why your show is so popular is that people are curious. People are perhaps more curious than they've ever been.
Yes.
And that curiosity can be satiated and stimulated because, there's so many secrets, so many of these secret spiritual practices and so on that were kept under wraps for centuries. And all of a sudden, you can now go learn these things. So I think that the quality of information, of course, there's, certainly a lot of garbage out there, but the quality of information is such that young people now, and anybody really willing to apply their curiosity, can most definitely learn and connect. The power to connect through the Internet and, of course, as we say, through the outer net, through people applying locally what we're learning globally, because really, if you can't do it in your own community, chances are it can't be done in the world.
Well, that's true. Bruce, what would you tell anybody who wants to change in this society today? How would they go about it?
Well, the first thing is we have to identify how we operate, and that's always been this mystery kind of thing, because if you ask the average person on the street, and I say, well, who's running your life? And they say, I'm running my life. I'm the one who's, making the plans and decisions and what I want to do. And I say, well, who is that I'm? When I get down to it neurologically, it's part of the mind, but it's part of what we call the conscious mind. And the conscious mind is the one that has our wishes and our desires and what we want. The other mind is more of a habit mind that you learn from your experiences and make habits. And it's like the push-button mind where somebody says, oh, that guy pushed my buttons and all of a sudden my behavior went crazy. That's that mind, the habit mind. Well, we believe that we've been running our life with our wishes and desires from our conscious mind, and neuroscience now reveals that our lives are actually invisibly run by the subconscious programs 95 to 99% of the time. And then you say, well, why is that relevant? And the answer is there's two things. That the fundamental programs in your subconscious you downloaded from other people. They're not your beliefs. They're what you've downloaded from your environment, your family, and your community. And those beliefs become your invisible operating principle working in that subconscious. So most of your life is run from that. And because it's called subconscious, it means you can't see it. And then that leads us, so what is the final problem? The problem is this. We believe we're running our life with our wishes and desires. When things don't work out, then we go and say, oh, my God, I'm a victim. It didn't, like the forces of nature are against me. And now it turns out that we only run our life with our conscious mind less than 5% of the time. that 95% of our life are the habit programs, and those habit programs just play spontaneously and invisibly, and this becomes very critical because if you don't see them playing, you don't see you're doing them. And if you don't see you're doing them, then you're like, hey, I'm just the innocent guy, and all of a sudden all this stuff came to me. It's sort of like, oh, no. it was this subconscious stuff that got really involved. So the first step is that how do we operate? And when we understand how we operate, then we get sort of like a manual to drive the body as a vehicle. And our driver education up to now has been totally destructive of our vehicles. And there's a new biology, and part of that's in our spontaneous evolution. It says, yeah, we need to participate in the evolution, and we've been programmed to be in the matrix. We're just playing out the programs that other people have put in. And it's interesting because you just simply take a survey of the world and you say, what do you want, world? You got 7 billion people. Tell me what you want. And if you don't get 99%, you got 90% of the people say, listen, all I want is some peace and some freedom, a place to sleep, a job,
Yeah.
Just
maybe a little truth.
Yeah. And so if you get 90% of the population that wants that, then you have to say, well, if we don't have that, well, it must be due to the very small percent that's left over. And that's what we're beginning to realize. We've been programmed with these cultural beliefs that are limiting, and that the new science is empowering because it says, oh, my God, we have to change the way we've been living and get our power back.
How do you reach someone who just doesn't care? How do you do that?
Oh, that's a real hard problem, George. And the issue is because we have so much compassion, it's just part of our humanity that you want to help people. And then we realize at some point, which I had to learn over my own career as well, people need help, and you go out and give them all the help you can get, and then you realize they actually were just using that energy to keep them where they were. Because if they didn't make up their mind to make the change, no matter how much you bring them to that water, they're not going to drink the water. So the issues are the only ones that make change are the individual.
And the Swami does have a saying about changing the world. He says there's no need to change the world. There's an easier way. All we have to do is toilet train the world, and we'll never have to change it again.
Yeah, maybe so. Swami might be right on that one.
But the idea is that in this process of as we become aware of how we are programmed, an interesting thing happens because we come to realize that most people are, you're responsible for what you do once you realize you're responsible. But you're not to blame. That there's a sense of what we have in common is that we're all programmed, and we've all been programmed by fear, and it's not even a conscious thing. Joseph Chilton Pierce says that culture is just these fears, an aggregate of fears that are passed down unconsciously, and we adopt these behaviors based on something that happened centuries ago, and we don't even realize it. So the good news is, as we're waking up, what the Swami would call the upwising, as we're wising up, as we're waking up to this program, and we recognize that we indeed have much more in common. And as we step away from this matrix of beliefs that we've had that have controlled us, we recognize that even though we have these beliefs that separate us in the head, in the heart we have this one trait that human beings have. Our perhaps one of our redeeming traits is love, and the ability to love the world, to love creation, to love ourselves, to love other people. And to begin to live out of that way, recognizing that is our natural state.
I opened up a door today for a guy who was carting his little baby in a little buggy. You would have thought that nobody has ever done that for him before. I mean, it was just a reflex thing for me. You open the door and let him in, and I mean, it was amazing, the look on his face. I mean, he looked like no one has ever done that for him before. What's wrong with people?
Well, George, we've been so programmed to fear each other because we trust nothing and no one that you live in your shell and you're on, that stress guard of where's it coming from because we've been programmed that it's coming. And that has been lethal to our biology and our physiology. And collectively, that is destructive of civilization, and that's why I'm so excited that when people understand the mechanisms, then all of a sudden the future is so wonderful and bright. I just wanted to add something about young people, because it was interesting. Young people have a feeling of being totally disconnected from the system. You know, they can't really get
But they always did. They always did.
But I mean in mass now. We call these, they call them the alphabet generations. Generation X, Y, Z, you know, they go to college and then they work at Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. And the issue why that's important is they're playing a structured part of this evolution, a profound role in it, and it's this. If everybody holds onto the system for dear life, then it's very hard to change the system. But when you have more than 50% of the population doesn't care if the system's there or not, and that'd be the alphabet generations, then all of a sudden the system is very volatile and capable of radical change, because more than half the population doesn't care that it exists. And so these young people don't know that they're promoting our evolution, and they're going to get thrust into their hands this entire world, and it's so exciting because they'll be doing jobs that we don't even know exist today in the next couple of years. So there's this rapid evolution, and I just wanted them to know that, and people recognize, yeah, it doesn't look good, especially for the young people, and yet the reality is in a very short period of time, the tables will turn, and they'll be leading us into a new civilization.
How would you handle meeting someone who is one of those psychic vampires, one of those folks that, you know, you just had to keep away, way too negative? Would you try to change him, Bruce, or get away from him?
I would get away from him. And the significance is that was where we go back and say, well, you know, I would love to change a lot of things, but I can change myself. And the rest of that is up to other people. And so the best thing you can do is just disconnect. And it's very interesting because all organisms on this planet communicate by vibration. Every organism, from bacteria all the way up to humans. And there's, as I talk about in my lectures, there's two kinds of different vibrations, and we bring it up in the book as well, called constructive and destructive interference. What we could call them, and most people are familiar with, is called good vibes and bad vibes.
Right.
And what is that? That's a reading, and it's a reading of like a needle scale that goes from harmony to disharmony. And when everything has a vibration, and so the significance is when you feel a vibration, you can read what if this is where you want to be or not by whether you're feeling harmony or disharmony. Nature, I mean, so like a gazelle doesn't have to walk up to the lion and go, are you my friend? It can feel the vibration from way over there, like, I don't want to be over there. Well, we have those vibes, but we've been programmed more or less in our world to ignore our feelings about things. And it turns out those feelings were the primal form of communication. You couldn't get ripped off if you could feel the guy already is like a predator sucking your energy out. You wouldn't be there. And so it goes back to, what would you do? When you feel that energy is not right, then you move away from the energy. And you'll start to gather with other people with similar energy, and all that good vibes will energize you and keep you alive.
What would you do, Steve? Same thing?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that each of us has a little bit of that, we can call it sociopathic energy and tendency because of how we've been trained and programmed. So the idea is to not buy into it, to recognize these patterns. In a certain sense, I would say that I wouldn't even focus on bad people. I would say that there are these patterns of behavior. And we've been divided into groups, and we tend to ascribe negative behavior to groups of people we've been told that we shouldn't like, and positive behavior to our own group. And what happens then is that we fail to recognize our own shadow behaviors. We have this in our country, this whole issue about torture, and the feeling of, we don't torture except when we do. And it's uncomfortable to want to look at one's own tendency to buy into these behaviors out of fear. So I think part of this is as individuals begin to recognize where we allow fear and habit and programming to plug us in and in a sense allow us to do things that are against our better nature.
Yet at the same time, we also have to recognize that there's some people out there who truly are evil people.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no, I keep thinking about this episode with this little girl that was abducted, who is now a grown person, had a couple kids by apparently this alleged kidnapper, and now they're checking his backyard for 2 other missing girls. I mean, how evil can you get?
And I think it's very important that we begin to recognize this. But part of the damage that this programming has done to turn people against one another is that we defend ourselves against people who are like us. And because of that fault in discernment, we sometimes fail to recognize the true toxic people.
Bruce Lipton, priority 1, what would you do? Somebody just went up to you and says, look, do whatever you need to do, get this turned around, fix it. What would you do?
Education. I would get people knowledge about themselves. Knowledge is power, and knowledge of self is self-empowerment. Knowledge that we've been given as to who we are gives us a vision of being frail and vulnerable entities, afraid of viruses and bacteria and stuff like that, when we are so powerful that it's hard to imagine. So, and you say, well, how did that happen? And it's very interesting because a great image of that is in India. When you want to train an elephant, you get a young elephant, it's a couple of feet high. You tie a big rope on its leg and tie it to a stake. And for 2 months, that elephant is tied to the stake. And every day for 2 months, it tries to pull away from the rope. It keeps tugging the rope and pulling on the rope. And after 2 months, this elephant has learned, why do this every day? I can't get away. And so what it realizes, when the rope is on its leg, it can't move at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then the elephant grows up. It's 12 feet tall. It's a monster. You could tie a rope on it into your house. It'll pull your house down. And yet, how do they keep the elephant still? They just tie a rope around its leg. They don't even tie it to a stake.
Yeah.
They just tie the rope.
Tie it around its leg.
And here's this monster, as timid as a mouse. And the fact is that it's the same thing that has happened to us. And it's time for us to get a real understanding of how truly powerful we are in not just creating our inner world, but how important our participation is in creating our outer world.
We've been programmed, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. That's the matrix. That's the whole matrix. We are living the matrix. And it's time to wake up. And waking up is, let me out of that trance, turn off that damn television set, and get away from this stuff, because they are pulling you in to play the game. And the only way to win this game is not to play it at all.
Hope, Stephen, do you have hope for the future?
Well, I think that I certainly feel that we have this tremendous potential right now. And, sometimes when, opportunity and crisis are really the same thing. And it really depends on our choices moment to moment. Do we choose to feed the wolf of love? Do we choose to feed the wolf of fear? Do we learn how to discern between the truly toxic forces around us and feed the healthier things?
Absolutely. Well said, indeed. Bruce, where do you get the book, Spontaneous Evolution?
I hope everywhere. For sure, Amazon and Barnes & Noble and most all the bookstores. It's out. It's a heavy book.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it's got 400-some pages in it, so it's worth the $1. You get a lot more words for the $1 in our book. A big sale on words.
Well, good job with that. We're going to keep you, Bruce, for phone calls when we come back in just a moment right here on Coast to Coast AM with our special guest, Dr. Bruce Lipton, his co-author, Steve Behrman, as well. The website here, brucelipton.com, is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Final hour of the show tonight. Couple from now, we'll have open lines right here on Coast to Coast AM. If you need to email me, that's George at coasttocoastam.com. Okay, this hour we'll take your phone calls with Dr. Bruce Lipton in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Bruce, did you always get into this area? Were you more of a biologist or academic?
That was the old life. I grew up shying away from the spiritual world and invested in sciences where I was going to find all my truth. So I was groomed in the Darwinian school of biology and was a conventional research scientist and didn't believe in spirit and any of that stuff. And once I was working on my work on cloning stem cells, that's when all of a sudden I started to realize what I was teaching medical students in the classroom and what the cells were showing me in the laboratory were completely different stories. And from that point, I started to try to get an understanding about how environmental signals influence the cells. And in the process, blew my mind when I found that our identities are actually picked up by protein antennas on the surface of the cell. And it was like, oh, my God. Our identities are not even in the cell; they're in the environment, and that, of course, blew my mind for not having been a spiritual person and not even thinking or looking for it. To see in the nature of the cells and the mechanism that our identity is something that exists outside of us.
Okay, let's go to the phones. We'll go to Houston, Texas, first of all, east of the Rockies. John, it's your turn. You're on with Dr. Bruce Lipton. Hi there.
How you doing?
Good.
This is y'all having a mind-blowing show tonight. I really enjoy it.
They're doing a great job. Go ahead.
Listen, I was wondering if y'all ever have heard of any of the philosophies of J.G. Bennett, Ulrich Nicole, or Spensky, any of those guys, because they're doing a lot of philosophy that concerns with thinking technology, and they have them different way back. These guys go back to the 40s and 50s, you know, and what it is they they look at frameworks for thinking, and they looked at evolving people. They basically said they're saying that people are asleep, you know, and they're trying to elevate their thinking. And a lot of people were getting trained, like for example, doing safety training. They make them think of a higher level of thinking around safety, and then management, quality control. But your application for self-enlightenment, that's a very applicable idea, for this possibility of, application. I was thinking that, have you ever heard of that type of those authors and stuff?
Well, personally, I haven't, George.
I have not either, Bruce, but I'm sure the teachings are pretty similar.
I would think so, because these is very interesting. The stuff that I ended up looking at and seeing in the nature of molecules and cells and membranes, I found that the mechanism is the wisdom that has been passed for 1,000 years or more. That people have always talked about the nature of how we believe and perceive the world and how that influences our life, and we let go of it in more modern times. But it's like, no, this is information that was known a long time ago, and by a lot of people, and is being brought forward today with modern science.
Do you use these abilities to help people heal themselves, or is it what area?
Well, the understanding that I offer is simply, here's how it works. And I like it because if I tell people how the mechanism works, but I never really go into anything to say what you should do with your own mechanism. But it really just gives you an insight of how it works, because when you understand how it works, then you understand how you can make changes in this system. And the biggest issue is, for years, most people think, well, you just give yourself a good talking to, and that'll fix all those bad habits. And we know that how many times we talk to ourselves, and we still end up with the exact same bad habits. Nothing's changed. And the reason is because the conscious mind and subconscious mind are like two separate entities, and there's nobody in the subconscious mind. It's more like a machine. So talking to yourself has very little effect. And even just becoming aware of things with your conscious mind doesn't change the programming. So it says, yes, we have a program, we have been programmed, and yes, if you know how the mechanism works, then you can go back in and rewrite your program. Just as much as I said that person dying from a terminal disease changed their thoughts, their belief about life, well, I only got a few weeks left, why should I just hang around here? I'm going to let go and go out and have the greatest time of my life. They let go of all the issues that concern them, and on that period of vacation, because their whole belief system is different, they have a spontaneous remission. So basically it says that if we understand the mechanism, we can help ourselves go somewhere. If we don't understand it, it's called magic.
Next up, we go to Ontario, Canada. Hey, Steve, take it away. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, George. Always good to talk to you.
You too.
My question for Bruce tonight is if he has any idea as to who or what could be the programmer behind this programming that he's talking about.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. There's some very interesting. Thanks, Steve, for the question. I'll start with this. There's a book, I can't remember the author, George probably knows, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it really talks about how come children from rich families grow up and maintain their riches, and so children from poor families have trouble getting out of that hole forever. And it's because of the beliefs that are propagated down through the system. As we mentioned earlier, look, if 90% or more of the population wants peace and harmony and community and all the wonderful things that we like, then not having it means that there's a very small percent that influences this. And unfortunately, and I'll go back to this story when I said the Jesuits knew about the critical nature of child programming the first 6 years. That's what I brought up earlier in the show. But my point about it is this. Do you think that information was forgotten over the millennia? The people that know that information have always known that information and have used it. And we have been programmed to run in these cages. Who are they? I don't know who they particularly are. I don't have any personal connection with them, but whoever is running the media, whoever is pushing the belief systems on us, I'll give you a simple example. We know about healthcare, as I mentioned earlier, is that we find that stress and lifestyle is responsible for most of our illnesses, and yet we have a system that doesn't offer you that known information but offers you drugs. It's like, well, who's doing that? And who's forcing all these drugs on us and all this stuff? And it's basically like we have to regain our sovereignty and our power. If you can drink strychnine, then I wouldn't worry about swine flu viruses and things like that. So basically it says whoever they are, their corporate interests, and their corporate interests are not supportive of the human population and civilization at this point.
Off to Las Vegas we go. Hello, Richard.
Hello, George. How you doing?
We're great, thanks.
Good conversation tonight. Bruce, I've got really a very simple question. Listening to your hypothesis and some of your thoughts on genes and gene bio-knowledgeability, I guess you might say. And my question is really simple. Do you think it all comes down to, did the Big Bang start itself? And if not, why not?
Well, that's a large step away from myself, but I think this is we're living in an autopoietic, meaning self-forming universe, and there's a geometry behind it, and that geometry is fractal. And the significance of fractal geometry, which is emphasized in the Spontaneous Evolution book, the significance of it is that it is the math that says, and this is really important, it's profound, it is the math that recognizes as above, so below as a physical reality of the universe that we live in. And because of the nature of patterns that exist in fractals, then what we can see is things exist, and if you disrupt the pattern, it would probably go back and come back into the same pattern anyway. So I think that there was, I don't want to say intelligent design because that gets the fundamentalists all excited, like there's some guy sitting on a chair, but it's a universal nature of mathematics and geometry and physics. And it says that we were drawn into this and through this, but there's a little bit of chaos in that fractal stuff, and that's where we're coming to a choice point. And
would that intertwine? I'm sorry, I mean.
Please go. Please do it.
Would that intertwine with multiple universes?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and those are the hard things that we talk about them, and then you read them about it in physics books, and then it's sort of like this is isn't that nice talk? And then the reality is it's real, and that's the hardest thing for us to own. It's real. Even physicists back in the 20s, when quantum physics was coming in, they realized that conventional physicists couldn't even accommodate this new science into their mind. That the whole thing that they saw back then. We are participating in the unfolding of this universe through our thoughts and our actions and behaviors in this world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
Have a good evening, gentlemen.
Okay, Riverside, California, first-time caller. Troy, it's your turn. Hi, Troy.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay, Troy.
I can't believe I finally got through. I've been trying for a long time. But tonight's show really blew my mind on so many levels, and the deepest one was today I was having my turtle just walk around outside the front yard, and I was like, wow, this guy's a lot more intelligent than I would think, and I'm watching him explore. And he ends up in some rock, and he gets comfortable. My girlfriend's like, oh, look how safe he is. And I think to myself, like, wow, I bet you that's how animals learn their instinctive survival behaviors. And what I realized is that the turtle sat there and felt, secure in this thing. And I was like, well, what he must do is transfer that information to his genetics so he could then transfer it to his offspring, which would explain why birds know how to migrate and when to migrate and et cetera, et cetera. And then I flip on your guys' show, and that's exactly what it's saying, is that the mind...
Synchronicity.
Influences the...
and it passes from generation to generation, too.
Exactly. That explains why I'm so much like my dad, who, passed away when I was 19, but the more I find out about him, the more I find out I'm just like him. And
that was that 6-year program I talked about, and it was part of the biology belief. The first 6 years, you are using your father. You're in a hypnotic trance, and your EEG activity is below consciousness as a predominant brain state. You're in a trance state. You're recording like a television recording. You're recording all that behavior. So when a person's parent, if a person loses their parent after 5, they will generally grow up and have behaviors that were just like their parents. So your first 5 or 6 years is when you got that programming.
What do you do next, Bruce? I mean, you keep pounding away. You're all over the place with conferences. What's on your plate?
Well, it's just basically as many people as I can get to talk to try to let them know how powerful they really are in a world that, of course, is made profit from disempowering them. And because I trust the common people versus the so-called leadership, because it's the common people are the ones that are collectively looking for all the same thing of that peace and harmony and everything that we want. So if the common people then get empowered, then that would be the manifestation of the culture that we would experience. And so my hope is to go out and talk to as many people as possible and say, it's time to wake up and we can create heaven on this planet.
Okay, next up we go to Crown Point, Indiana, east of the Rockies. Dennis, it's your turn. Hi.
Hi, George. Hi, Bruce.
Hi.
I can't believe I made it onto your show. I've been a long-time listener.
You did.
Actually, since you took Art's place, George. So, long story short, this show has changed my life forever. But I still find myself caught in the yo-yo effect of what Bruce is talking about with that first 6 years of your mind being programmed. And I was curious, he mentioned in his book briefly at the end about the Psych-K program and how to change that in a matter of moments or minutes at least. And I was curious if you could elaborate on that. Because again, I have my highs and lows, but after all these years of working on myself more or less, I still find myself slipping down and periodically and kind of staying at the same place as opposed to, elevating myself up higher and staying there.
Well, it's a great mission you're working on, and it's the most important thing because taking back this power is very critical. But as I said, the conscious mind is your wishes, your intention for change only run it less than 5% of the time. That's why, positive thinking has a bad rep, because you use your conscious mind for positive thinking, but then it turns out your habits are running 95% of your life. So positive thinking has a lot of trouble overcoming that. And so you have habits, and you get a handle on it, and then sometimes apparently they slip away because they're still in the program. And changing the program on the website, brucelipton.com, there's a column for resources, which includes Psych-K, and basically there's a whole new form called energy psychology, which says you can change the field and the thought through super learning, just like people that go through exercises, they can flip through a book like page after page or like less than a second, just flip through it and read the book. When you get in a mindset like that, you are capable of reprogramming. And there's processes that you use to get into that. And once you do, it's sort of like a window opens up, and you can start downloading information and manage a rewriting of your own belief system. And that is it's just so exciting because it's one of the important steps of how can we rapidly make the changes we need at a time when we're in an urgent need for change.
You mentioned a little bit about Einstein in your work here.
Yes.
Talking about how he says that the field is only reality. Now, what did he mean by that?
Well, when we before Einstein, we had Newtonian physics, and they looked at the world as a world made out of physical molecules and atoms, and the atoms were like those little solar system. Well, they didn't see it that way. They saw it like little marbles, and that they saw the whole world was just made out of these little physical particles. And when Einstein and his cohort of quantum physicists came into the world, they started looking inside that atom, and instead of finding physical things like protons and neutrons and electrons, there weren't physical things in the atom. They were actually energy vortices, sort of like nano tornadoes, more or less. And the significance is it's not made out of matter. So basically it says the atom itself is not even made out of matter. It's made out of energy. It's connected to all of the energy in the field, and therefore there's nothing that can be isolated. It's all connected. And so what he was talking about is, well, you look at matter and think it's physical. It's an illusion that it's actually focused force fields, and it's all connected to the field, the non-tangible world, so that our belief in a material reality is more or less an optical illusion.
An optical illusion?
Yes. It's light bouncing off of energy and not matter. And then you say, well, yeah, but if it's just energy, why can't I put my hand through the wall? And then I say, yeah, but these are like miniature tornadoes. So I would say, well, if you got in your car and drove 100 miles an hour into the base of the tornado, would you be able to drive through the tornado? And the answer is no. It'd be like hitting a stone wall. So a force field, which is not, the tornado is not physical and tangible, it's an energy force. It can appear to be like a concrete wall if the force is strong enough, and that's what atoms are.
How many times do people have to get to this point where, let's say, meditation will get them to understand this?
I guess it's an awakening process, and some people, one modality is more effective than another modality, and that's why, for example, when Dean Ornish was helping his patients, it wasn't just meditation. He really said, look, it's how you eat and how you live, what stresses you let come to you. The meditation, of course, is all this. It's basically saying, can I get back in touch with the control mechanism? Because if I learn how to handle the control mechanism, then I'm not bouncing around the world like a ball in a pinball machine. I'm actually now guiding my place. And then you say, okay, what are you talking about, Lipton? And I say, we're creating this world. And then all of a sudden I say, well, if we're creating, why would we create this mess? And then I go back, well, that's because other people are actually creating it and programmed us. But I wanted people to know, because almost everybody out there in this audience at one point was involved with creating their world personally. And I'm going to say when in a minute, but I just want to say when I suggest when this was, I will also suggest that you were the healthiest you ever were. You were the happiest you ever were. That life was beautiful for you, and I mean, you couldn't wait for the next day to happen because it was so exciting. And I would say you literally created heaven on earth. And I say, when did that happen? And I would go back and suggest that when you first fell head over heels in love with somebody, and you were so in love with them that I want you to go back to that moment of, like I refer to it like the honeymoon, and say, look, go back and weren't you healthy then? Wasn't life exciting? Didn't you look forward? And I want to say, do you think it was a coincidence or an accident that you just happened to have a piece of heaven? And what I would say is that was a creation. And if you know how you did it, you can make it every day of your life.
We'll be back with final phone calls with Dr. Bruce Lipton on Coast to Coast AM. Well, for StreamLink members now, you can go back into the past 2 years for archives. Pretty good deal for 15 cents a day, huh? Well, if you haven't joined up for StreamLink yet, which also gets you podcasting, you just plug it into your computer and the show's there the next morning. Just go to coasttocoastam.com. So, Bruce, how do we answer the question, what are we doing here?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a funny answer for my own cells. When I told you I had that epiphany when I recognized my identity was on the outside of the cell and it was playing through the cell, I sort of asked my cells, I said, well, why have a spiritual self and a physical self? and my cells responded to me with a question, and it made me laugh, and it was because it was so down to it. And the question I got back was, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like? And if you're just a spirit, what does a sunset look like? And if you're just a spirit, what does being in love feel like? And I realized, oh my goodness, the human body is a device to convert the world that we live in into sensation. And so that each of us picks up our own broadcast through a set of specialized antennas. Medical community studies a small group of this. They call them self-receptors, receivers of self. And so that we're picking up an identity, and so it's sort of like jumping into a virtual reality machine. A spirit is awareness and knowledge, but the body is a translator of the environment that gives us sensation. So we're here to sense the world, but we're also, as quantum physicists recognize, we're creating the world. So it's like, oh, this is a gift that we get to come to this beautiful planet, at least it was when many of us got here, and we get to create and sense and experience and taste and feel and love. And it's like, wow, what better life can you think of? So that's why I really look at this place and think, well, to me it fits the description of heaven, a place where we can come and create the life we like. And the evolution that we're going through right now is to give us a chance to create the life we like rather than others.
Okay, now we go. Trucking in New Jersey, first-time caller. Hey, Bobby, I'm glad you got in.
Good morning, fellas. How are y'all today?
Good.
Hi, Bobby.
The reason I'm calling is originally I had a question. Then I realized I didn't have a question. So I was just called to tell y'all that, Stephen and Bruce, you are absolutely right. What y'all going on is exactly what it is. Only thing I ask you to do is put down a research book, look into your heart, and use common sense. Everything you need to know, we already know.
Absolutely.
Mr. Noy?
Yes, sir.
One day I'm going to send you an email to explain to you the incredible events that led me to listening to Coast to Coast. I've listened since December, and I have figured it all out by listening to your show.
Okay, well, you let me know, Bobby, because I haven't figured it out yet. All right, thanks, my man.
Thanks, Bobby.
Send me an email, george@coasttocoastam.com. Bruce, you're continuing to evolve, though. You're learning, you're changing. I mean, even I've noticed from some of your earlier works, the biology of belief, there's kind of an evolution into spontaneous evolution.
Yeah, and it's because once you can see the pattern, then it's all of a sudden, I said, I go back to just that simple statement we talked about before when people experience that honeymoon state. And I said, go back and just visualize that and be in it for a moment. You realize how fabulous it was to be here. And the evolution of the biology of belief, the spontaneous evolution, is how we as a community of people can manifest that heaven on this planet without killing each other and without all of the destruction and rampant loss of the environment. And so we're evolving, and it's so exciting because we're on the threshold of experiencing a world that it would almost be fictional if it's not the reality right in front of us, and just within a year or so.
Let's go to Denver. Hello, Ryan. Thank you for holding.
Hi. Well, Bruce, I had a pretty spontaneous evolution myself tonight, listening to this program. At 1:11 a.m., I believe I may have cracked the harmonic code regarding frequencies. I'm an electronic musician, and so I know a lot about frequencies. I study frequencies. And while I was listening to the program, I typed in 528 hertz because I remember hearing something about how that's a healing frequency and a DNA-altering frequency. I don't know if you've heard anything about that or not, but this thing came up called Salfago frequency, and he had all these different frequencies mapped out, each with different names or intentions behind them, like 174 was foundation and 285 was quantum cognition and so on and so forth. And what I noticed was that all of those fit into a pattern on a numeric keyboard. So if you picture 528 hertz, it would be the middle key, the bottom key, and the upper key, 8. And then the next one he went on to was 639, which he calls integrating structures. Now I know each of these harmonic frequencies also has a geometric pattern associated with them. And so what I'm thinking is that if I can take these patterns and these frequencies according to different algorithms across the numeric keypad and map them to their according geometric patterns, that might help humanity as a whole evolve somehow. And I was going to see what you thought of that, and perhaps you could apply it to your own research somehow.
Well, it's very interesting because a lot of work was done on the nature of vibrations and health and harmony and healing. And Royal Rife, probably George has had shows about Royal Rife.
Sure. Yep.
And he was one of the guys who showed, yes, when you start to get the right vibrations, you can bring harmony back into the system and eliminate parasites and viruses, et cetera. So basically, and it goes back to Einstein, as George brought up earlier as well, that the field is really the primary shaper of the material realm, and that you're talking about the vibration in the field and the geometry, and of course that would translate into the physicality. Of course, I'm not familiar with all the frequencies, especially as you are, but it would fit. All that would fit in an understanding.
Why isn't everyone enlightened, Bruce? Why do you have to pull so many people?
Oh, because I think there was a time back there where some people started to recognize you can take advantage of the other people. And from that time on, there were people who have always taken advantage of people. And those that have lost their power have propagated that loss from generation to generation to generation. And here we are today. And yet it was only a belief system. And as I said, the beliefs change, civilizations change. It's like clockwork. And we're in the process of one right now. And so it's very exciting. It's part of our evolution. I guess we have to go through all these learning experiences to make the jump with an awareness rather than just a mystical belief.
All right, Blanchard, Louisiana, east of the Rockies. Hi, David.
Hi, y'all, this evening.
Good.
I'm just a simple old country boy. But,
I've heard that before.
Oh, here we go now, right, George?
But,
what do you want, David?
Well, I just couldn't help but think basically the boys you're talking to just sound like old hippies on steroids. But they did say something that was interesting to me about reprogramming and all. And I was thinking, I remember one time, and this was a life-changing experience for me. And I was observing somebody, and I was thinking, boy, what a stupid fool he is. And then it hit me out of the blue that I acted just the same way he did. And I became more introspective after that, and that sure did change me. I just wished I'd learned that back when I was a teenager.
Those are the eye-opening things that even in my own, it's very truthfully, when I understood the nature of the biology of belief and I saw the mechanism of how we actually create our biology through our thoughts and all that, I was so excited. I wanted to tell everybody. I mean, if George would have given me an opportunity to get on the radio, I would have yelled at everybody, look at this understanding, because if you know this, you can create this wonderful life. And it was funny because the people that would show up for my lectures would sort of cock their head and go, Lipton, for a guy who knows this stuff, your life doesn't look that good. And that's when it really hit me. I said, oh, my God, I had this conscious learning, but I was still living from my habit life. So my life was completely out of step. And that was the thing, as you just said, all of a sudden I had to look at that part that was invisible. And then I started to realize, as psychologists tell us, like 70% of my thoughts were negative and redundant. And it starts to well, if thoughts are creating your life, man, maybe you better start getting a hold of these thoughts. So like yourself, I started to recognize I better manage myself first. And that was really great, because once I put my hands on driving the wheel, then I was driving my life rather than a captive backseat person watching a car go out of control.
Bruce, how many enlightened people does it take to begin to create change?
Well, as transcendental meditation people have shown, when they did numbers where they all did a meditation like to bring peace to a place, and it's repeated a number of experiments, they found that the square root of 1% of a population, if they become coherent in their beliefs, can alter the field that other people will then conform with that. So when you look at a square root of 1%, we're talking not a large number of people. Probably, George, the number of people that are on your radio show listening every night is a large enough audience to coherently get together with a belief system and manifest change in this world.
Well, they've changed hurricanes. They've made it rain when I never thought they could, collectively. Why not, though, the one strong individual? Why can't that be accomplished?
What was that? Why one strong?
The one strong person as opposed to the millions.
Oh, okay. You know what it's like? Remember I said, we talked about Einstein said, well, the quote essentially, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. What he meant was the invisible force is the field, or the sole governing agency of matter, the particle. So I very briefly say, look, I take iron filings and just, pieces of iron dust and sprinkle it on a piece of paper and they form random pile. And I say, every time I do it, it forms a random pile. Then one time I stick a magnet under the piece of paper, and then when I sprinkle the filings, you get this beautiful shape. And I said, well, where'd the shape come from? It wasn't built into the filings. It was a reflection of the field. And then we say, yes, the field, according to Einstein, was shaping matter. Now, here's the interesting point. There's an effect. Every iron filing actually has an effect on the field itself. But every iron filing's effect is so negligible that the individual iron filings don't disrupt the field. And then I say, but what if, now this is the cool part, you took all the loose iron filings, compressed them together back into a bar, and had them all become coherent or aligned, then all those individual iron filings collectively would make a magnet, which then in turn would alter the field. So basically it says, when we're dispersed, and as individual iron filings around the world, our own personal effect on the world around us is negligible. But if we come together as a coherent group and share the same belief system and broadcast that with our thoughts, then basically we're acting like a magnet. And therefore, a group of coherent people can actually change an existing field and make a creation. And that is what I think is the primary step in our evolution, where all of us as individual people see ourselves as scattered iron filings. And yet, what we're going to find out, if we just get our thoughts coherent about a positive future, a sustainable future, that will be a force to contend with, and that force itself would precipitate the evolution.
And are you hopeful for that?
I am truly hopeful for it, because I started lecturing on this in 1985, and I could get a handful of people to show up. And then as it started to get closer to 2000, larger numbers were showing up. And what I was watching was the awakening of people, especially like the audience that we're talking to tonight, that are saying, I want more information, I want different sources of information, because as your news, you brought it out at the very beginning of the show, we don't trust the sources of information, and it's because they're not working for us, they're using us. And so I get excited because I think the collective population is now consciously awakening to let's take our power back.
Next up, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hey, Satch, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of stresses in my life, RH baby and a couple deaths before I was age 6 and et cetera. The one question I wanted to ask is, why do we think that we're programmed beings? Why can't we just accept that we're just basic beings, and why do we feel that we have to program all the time?
Well, good question, and basically what it says is this, is that nature can't make like sperm and egg genetically programmed for a future, because the future is always dynamic, environment is always changing. So basically nature says, look, I'll give you a basic structure of a human, but your first 6 years of your life, you have to download the experiences acquired by those that were successful, and therefore as the environment changes, the beliefs that are passed down are changed as well, and it allows us to dynamically adapt. So learning is a very important part. So awareness is our survival. So as we become more aware as a population, we also adapt better to the world. So it's really incumbent upon us to learn these understandings. And it's not that the programs, the system is bad, because, hey, we've been talking about mainly the programs are negative, but guess what? What if the programs were positive? What if you grew up an unusual situation in a family where the parents loved each other and they always dealt with win-win and harmony and peace for everyone in the community, and they lived that as a real life, and you were a child in that family? That meant in the first 6 years you would be downloaded with automatic programs to live this way, and the significance is the rest of your adult life you could daydream, and the programs that you have would be so good that you would find yourself at the top of the pile without even making an effort.
Next up, Asheville, North Carolina. Hello, Anthony. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Hey, Bruce, and hey, Steve. How are y'all tonight?
Oh, Anthony, it's good to hear from you. I hope you're doing well as we are.
Oh, excellent. Listen, I got your Spontaneous Evolution audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. And what I was wanting to ask you is, I've listened to, several teachers and spiritual teachers, educators, Lynn McTaggart and Zero Limits with Joe Vitale and Arnold Patton, Robert Schonfeld, and you guys have a similar theme. And with this new consciousness, I was wondering, do you think this could tie in with maybe 2012? And maybe that would be the new awakening, and maybe when this new paradigm will start coming into being, and the old beliefs and limiting and restrictive beliefs will start relaxing.
I absolutely concur with that opinion, and I feel that, of course, that I really have an understanding of the astrology is not just stars and pie in the sky stuff. Astrology is astrophysiology. It changes life on the planet according to seasons and cycles and all that stuff. We are going through a profound and momentous cycle right now. It's very interesting because people talk about 2012. Unfortunately, you're going to get the scary people, of course, because they want to keep us scared, that, it's the end of the world and be afraid. And the fact is, no, it's the end of the way we have been living and the beginning of a new way of living. And it's a requirement because, as scientists have already told us, we're already on the extinction list right now. So what's interesting is that 2012 talks about more of a transformation, and what's interesting is you do not get the transformation, though, until after a period of chaos, and the reason is very simple. You can't build a sustainable foundation on the foundation that we are living on right now. The foundation is the problem. So the chaos is the restructure and reorganization. Just to give a very brief picture, I said cells are like miniature people, and then I say, think about this, your cells in a caterpillar, and every day the caterpillar is growing, and all the cells are working really hard, and the business is booming, the economy's going, the caterpillar is getting bigger every day, and all those, economic people will be charting and say, wow, this is fabulous, and then one day, all of a sudden the business slows down. It stops eating so much. The growth starts to go into a static place. The cells are looking around like, what's going on? Business is falling apart here. Then there's a little turmoil. Cells start to commit suicide, apoptosis it's called. There's dissolution. The structure starts falling apart. All the cells inside are thinking, oh, my God, what's the end? Except there are a bunch of cells called, and I love the name, imaginal cells. They're stem cells. And they're genetically identical to all the other caterpillar cells, but they see the world differently. And they assemble into a beautiful butterfly from the wreckage. And we're in a caterpillar world going into a butterfly world.
The name of Bruce Lipton's work, Spontaneous Evolution, that he co-wrote with Stephen Behrman. Thank you so much, Bruce.